All right, guys. Well, welcome to Zoom. I believe this is number 5. I think you guys can see everything now. Yep. And what we are talking about today is fiber, which may not be the sexiest topic of all time, but is certainly a really, really fucking important one. And we'll go over why. We push fiber really heavily on this program. We don't do macros. I just find that it's impossible for people to kind of track how much protein, how many carbs, and how many fats they are. And it's way easier to just kind of focus on the stuff that's super, super important for your health. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go through this. So we'll try to talk about why we set up things for fiber goals, etc., as we go throughout this. Nutritional fiber is a type of carbohydrate that cannot be absorbed or digested by your body. It's the indigestible part of foods such as vegetables, fruit, and grains, which is interesting, right? Because here's something that you cannot digest, yet has such important value to your body nutritionally. And there's multiple reasons for that. We'll get into it. I want to give you some examples of really, really high fiber foods, and we'll give you a big list at the end. And I'll make sure that you guys each get this list. And then as coaching clients, you should have it anyhow, but we'll send you another one. We just did a really pretty version for Instagram. Passion fruit has a massive amount of fiber. Raspberries, I mean, that's one of my cheat codes. If you're just trying to get in fiber every day, start your day with some raspberries. It makes it very, very easy. Get some pinto beans or black beans in as your carbohydrate, and then use some psyllium husk, which is a seed. Very, very easy to start hitting your fiber goal. There are two main types of fiber. There's soluble fiber. This dissolves in water and forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract and can help lower cholesterol and blood sugar. And, we talked about examples that are just as a total high in fiber, but there are certain foods that are very high in soluble fiber. One of the foods that's highest in soluble fiber is apples, actually. So apples, artichokes, black beans, blackberries, very, very high in soluble fiber. And then in terms of insoluble fiber, it doesn't digest in water and it adds bulk to the stool, promoting regular bowel movements and potentially helping with constipation. And examples that are really high in insoluble fiber are quinoa, lentils, almonds, sweet potatoes, and mame. Just a generic recommendation, you want to be getting a plethora of fruit and vegetables, in part because some are higher in soluble fiber, some of them are higher in insoluble fiber, and also because they are loaded with different antioxidants. So there are all sorts of antioxidants that we get from fruits, like anthocyanins. Vitamin C acts like a antioxidant, resveratrol. I could go on and on. There are a series of these antioxidants, but by getting the entire color of the rainbow, you're going to have access to more of these. And I actively work like every day, like I said, to have certain things like raspberries. I have avocado almost every day. Black beans are very, very helpful to hit my fiber. Why do we care about fiber? So I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of research papers, but this is a research paper that I think was really instrumental and is also a meta-analysis. And this has been duplicated over and over again. If you get online and you watch people argue, they'll point to a study. And the truth is that one study, I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything, but it's one of a consensus or a plethora that you really need to know if something's the best practice. And in this case, this is a meta-analysis that looked at 60 studies. And then we've seen this been duplicated over and over again. So this is the consensus of research. And that is every 10 grams of fiber reduces your risk of dying by a particular disease by 10%. So what basically happens is if you eat 10 grams of fiber daily, it reduces all symptoms mortality, which is a fancy way of saying all causes of death, by 10%. If you were to eat 20 grams a day, it would reduce all cause mortality by 20%. If you were to have 30 grams of fiber, it would reduce it by 30%. So you're saying, well, Jake, what if I have 100 grams of fiber? Do I have 100% risk-free of death? No. What it means is let's say you're a 40-year-old male who has a family history of prostate cancer and your risk of that particular type of mortality is X percentile. Well, it will reduce your risk of that percentile by, say, 40% if you were having 40 grams daily of fiber consistently. So it's still a dramatic change, but obviously it's not 40% of less likely all the way around to dying. It's 40% less likely of that particular incident of death. And this by itself, this could just easily be what we call a correlation, right? If grip strength, perfect example. People who have greater grip strength live longer lives. Okay, well, is there some sort of mechanism in your forearm that's allowing you to live a longer life? No, of course not. It just means that people who are more active have higher grip strength and therefore they live longer. It's just a correlation. Well, people who are bothering to eat their fruit and vegetables are probably doing a lot of other things right. They're probably going to see their doctor. They're probably hiring a nutrition coach. They're probably exercising on a regular basis. But the point is that this has been duplicated over and over again, one, and then we know in specific instances that it directly relates to specific diseases and big diseases, which is why it has such a hefty all mortality decrease in risk, because there are some things that it really, really helps with, which is number one, heart disease. Soluble fiber plays a key role in lowering cholesterol by binding to cholesterol and bile acids in the digestive tract, preventing their absorption and promoting their excretion. This in turn reduces the amount of cholesterol available to build up in the bloodstream, lowering LDL, bad cholesterol. So essentially this reduces the amount of LDL that you have in your system, which we know that's also linked to things like labs like apolipoproteins, which we know directly tie to plaque buildup. So this can reduce plaque buildup in your heart. So it plays a key role with your cholesterol markers, which just still to this point, LDL is highly, highly correlated with heart disease and definitely correlated with an increase of apolipoproteins, which contribute, we know, to plaque in the heart. So one, we're targeting heart disease, and this is for sure, like we've seen this again over and over and over again in the research. And then two, it definitely reduces certain types of cancer. I've seen a decrease in all symptoms cancer, and back to the point, that could be like, oh, Jake, that's just correlation. I would be very open to that. If you said to me, hey, just eating plenty of fruits and vegetables all day and the fiber from it is not going to prevent me from all types of cancer, and it's just simply a correlation that people who eat a bunch of fruits and vegetables are also doing a ton of other things that are healthy for them, which is actually preventing them from having cancer. But one thing we know for certain is that it helps with colon cancer, which is what our statement is here. Fiber can reduce the risk of certain types of cancer, particularly colon cancer. The incident rate of early onset colon cancer is expected to double by 2030. If you didn't know this, colon cancer is on a massive rise. It's not the most increasing form of cancer. Believe it or not, breast cancer still is, even though it's completely preventable. Breast cancer still has the greatest increase here in the United States of America, but colon cancer is really raising up. And I think it's an unfortunate side effect of our preoccupation with protein. I'm very much team protein, but you have to be really mindful of things like saturated fat. You have to be mindful of your total red meat intake, and you definitely have to be mindful of your processed meat intake. Because something's a processed food inherently does not mean it's bad, but processed meats are something that you want to limit in your diet. Fiber improves bowel function, especially in insoluble, and improves gut microbiome. And I want to stop there for a second and talk about bowel function, because you think, all right, well, it's making me regular. I'm going to just be kidding. It's helping me shit. What could that do? There is just a ton of linkage to even having consistent bowel movements and things like dementia, Parkinson's. So having regular bowel movements can be impactful even to dementia. And again, that's another one where you say, Jay, is this just a correlation? Well, again, we have, like, at this point, multiple correlations, which is again why I think that first study is so powerful, that fiber is linked to all these, which means it's probably just a good bet to have fiber, even besides the things that we've directly proved. You know, certainly people who have fiber are less likely to be obese, which plays a role in dementia. Lack of alcohol plays a role being active, plays a role sleeping, and people who are likely to be having fruit are probably also doing all of those things. But we do know for a fact as well, though, the actual act of bowel movements themselves plays a role in these disorders. And we hear people, you probably see it all online. You guys probably are active enough on Instagram because you found me. Unless you're through a referral, but most people have followed me on Instagram when they end up working with me. You probably hear people talk about gut health all the time, or gut microbiome. And I literally did a short interview with a friend of mine from college, went to U of R, and then now runs a lab at UCLA. I worked for Pfizer for a number of years, really smart guy. And his whole career is in microbiome. You can look it up. It's John Baker, Jacob Zemer. His name's Baker, Baker, or you can just go on my YouTube channel and scroll through and look for gut microbiome. But he basically said, like, most of the stuff that you're seeing on social media, like, we have no idea a lot about gut microbiome. We're really far away from understanding it. But we do know exercise, not being overweight, certain probiotics, depending on what you're doing, and fiber are definites for microbiome. So again, there could be a relationship between having regular bowel movements and your gut microbiome, which may again be why it helps fight things in particular like colon cancer or rectal cancer, things like this. So we've got heart disease, certain forms for certain of cancer directly linked to eating fiber, and then diabetes, which is another one of your top 6 causes of death. Fiber, particularly soluble fiber, helps manage diabetes by slowing down the absorption of sugar and fat and helps maintain stable blood sugar levels. Be clear, like you see all these people tracking their insulin levels and things like this. Your insulin is intended to spike. A healthy person is intended to do that. But big swing fluctuations are not great, and fiber helps slow down the absorption of this fat and sugar. So you're talking about really knocking off like 3 of the major causes of death. Fiber in the American diet. Most of the adults in the U.S. do not consume the recommended daily amount of fiber. I'm sure nobody's shocked about that, with less than 10% meeting the guidelines. Similarly, only about 10% eat the recommended vegetables and 12% eat fruit, which means people like fruit more than vegetables. I don't blame them. Again, you want to get your sources from all different varieties and colors. You want to have fruits, you want to have vegetables. If I was to really pinpoint, again, broccoli, for example, is a vegetable that everybody should be eating, some sort of cruciferous vegetable just because of the magnesium, because of an antioxidant known as sulforaphane. Everybody should be having cruciferous vegetables as part of their diet. This is not a political message. Please, 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 please. My plate, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but in 2011, we used to have what's known as the food pyramid. In 2011, it was replaced by My Plate. And so the dietary guidelines have changed for a long time, and they've mostly been that about half your plate should be fruit and vegetables, which is the entire point of this image. Half of your plate should be fruit and vegetables, and then you should have some sort of complex carbohydrate, which they promote their grains. You know, if I was to look at this, is this pretty spot on? It's pretty spot on. I might over here at Jigsy Morel, see, we might make that protein a little bit bigger, but fruit and vegetables should way far away be your major source of fiber and a huge portion of your diet. So let's get into our recommendations for nutrition, which are not that far off from that plate we just looked at. And by the way, that plate, it's nonpartisan. I don't care. Obesity does not discriminate on your political beliefs. 0.8 times your body weight in protein is the minimum amount of protein that we recommend on this program. You all know that because you're all used to getting yelled at about how much protein you're eating. Minimum 10 grams of fiber per 500 calories in the diet. Now, we have clients in here who are at like 10 grams of fiber per 400 calories. It's a case-by-case situation, but we want at least 10 grams of fiber per 500 calories. And if you're newer to coaching, we're probably moving you up over time into that fiber goal, because for some people, it's tough at first to hit it. And so I really look at what people, are they getting protein? Are they getting their fiber? And then we also really place an emphasis on monounsaturated fats and omega-3s over saturated fat. And back to that saturated fat reason, it's because of colon cancer. Saturated fat by itself can be a contribution to colon cancer, but also red meat and certain forms of it. And again, red meat itself is not inherently bad. It's just the portion you're having, and definitely processed meats, sausages, hot dogs. You guys all know, all you've heard forever, hot dogs are good for you. Monounsaturated fat examples: olive oil, avocados, almonds. Omega-3 examples, which is a polyunsaturated fat: mackerel, salmon, ground flaxseed. You hear a lot of people talk about polyunsaturated fats right now. Like, omega-3 is an actual example that actually is beneficial. The majority of fiber should be consumed from fruit and vegetables. I said that maybe a dozen times now. That recommendation of 5 servings each is generic. However, these foods are high volume and they are nutrient dense. So what does that mean, they're high volume? It means fruit and vegetables don't have a lot of calories. So basically they help fill you up. So if you make half of your plate fruit and vegetables, you're going to keep your calories low, whether it's lunchtime, it's dinner, and you're going to have a much fuller stomach. So they're a high volume food. You eat a lot of it for very low calories. And then they are nutrient dense, and they are dense in micronutrients. So, fruits and vegetables, they're high in like vitamin C and manganese and all these other different minerals and vitamins, which again are going to help you be more satiated. The generic recommendation of eating all the colors of rainbows still holds true, which is why, you should have your cruciferous vegetables, your spinach or your broccoli, things like this, your cauliflower. You should also have things like your carrots, You want to get different colors because typically they represent different nutrients. How to hit your fiber goal, which is something we work on with you guys all the time. We have a hand guide, if you may have seen it when you looked through your coaching welcome packet. But as a generic recommendation, it says meal portion size. I was thinking about like how I could word this differently for the year 2025. But basically people who are 180 pounds and above should really be having like 2-3 fists of vegetables or 1 or 2 cups of fruit per meal. People who are under 180 pounds, like 1 to 2 fists of vegetables and 1 to 2 fists of fruit. Basically, the larger you are, the more fruit and vegetables you should be incorporating into your diet. Of course, the larger you are, the more calories you're eating. The more calories you're eating, the more fiber we want you to have, because per at least 500 calories, you want you to get 10 grams of fiber. So just as a general rule, if you're like to start your day, like think, okay, like I want to get X amount of portion of raspberries and blueberries to start my day. For lunch, I want to get X portions of vegetables for my lunchtime and for dinner, etc. And if you really are actively trying to get like 2-3 servings with each of these meals, it will be very, very easy if you're having like 4 meals a day, that by the end of the day, you end up at 5 servings. Or pardon me, you end up with 10 servings, 5 of each, because again, 2.5 times 4 will get you to 10. So you will get 5 servings of each fruit and vegetables. For your carbohydrates, now I use this word in parentheses because fruit and vegetables are carbohydrates as well. But we saw that little portion of the My Plate. I'll refer back to it. So this portion of My Plate that says grains. For these sort of foods, I would suggest choosing things like potatoes, which are a great option, or other foods that are high in fiber. And that doesn't mean we're a team anti-rice or any of those things, guys. And you might be hitting your fiber goal, and we might be totally fine with you having rice. It's not. It's case by case dependent, as long as you're doing well with your fiber goal. But potatoes are often very helpful with that because, again, they are a high volume food. You can eat a lot of potatoes in comparison to the amount of rice you can have. They also are a high fiber food. We also like products that utilize modified starch or specific emulsifiers like xanthan gum. You know, going back to processed food is not inherently bad. There are certain processed foods that you definitely want to avoid. And as a general rule, you want about 80% of your diet being from things like single ingredient foods. Like I just had for lunch bison, I had avocado, I had some green beans, and I had some carrots. That was literally just the lunch I had, my meal 3, really. My second lunch. Products that utilize modified starch, though, are examples like Mission Carb Wraps. It's great. Specific emulsifiers like Halo Top, and you'll see that these products have fiber in them. Quest bars, really, really high in fiber and really, really helpful as almost like a supplement. Like when you're new to trying to hit your protein goal, like you might very frequently lean on something like whey protein. When you're new to trying to hit your fiber goal, incorporating like a Eat Better bagel or Royo bread might really, really help you hit your fiber every day. Catalina Crunch, another example, something that can be used as a supplement. We also like whole or multi-grains, and we also like beans, black beans, pinto beans, lentils. They're all very, very high in fiber. Supplements can be helpful as well. Supplements like psyllium husk, super, super easy to use. It's a seed. Using psyllium husk will really, really, really help make it easy to hit your fiber goal. And saying again, food products, even though we already mentioned that, products that utilize modified starch or specific emulsifiers, smart sweets. There is a danger with fiber, guys, not for your health, but for those around you. Just be mindful of how much fiber you take in a sitting because you may become gassy. I don't mind the feeling of bloat. I've heard people say to me like, oh, I feel bloated after I eat fiber. Well, good. There's nothing wrong with feeling bloated before you go to bed. You feel bloated before you go to bed. You snack less. You wake up the next day. You end up using the restroom like 2 times in a row. You feel completely detoxed and you move on with your life. And so I think, if you can for a moment, like at the end of the day, you're like, oh man, I feel really bloated. Fine. As long as your wife doesn't want to murder you, all good.